Everybody, today is what is today? Wednesday, August 30th. Let me pull up our slides for today. Today we kind of got off on a bunny trail, so this is going to be a relatively short summary. Let's just double check something. I want to make sure that you have, go ahead and take a look, go ahead and take a look at the last page in your notes. Again, if you've been gone for a couple days, you have the human brain notes section. You've got a digital copy in the folder from yesterday, from Tuesday. So go ahead and look at that folder in GoodNotes or in Schoology. And I think actually the dates, I'm going to change. The dates on that folder are Tuesday the 29th through Wednesday the 30th, and I'm going to have to change it to Thursday because we're going to need tomorrow to finish these notes. But I want to make sure that you have the sections of the brain colored and labeled. And so once you have that downloaded into GoodNotes, come on back to the video and let's make sure that you've got everything kind of highlighted, okay? Okay, so you will see the very last page of your notes. If you have GoodNotes, that last page might be the wrong direction. And so if you're trying to color the pages and the page keeps flipping, I need you to look at the top right. There are three dots. Push those three dots. And I think the second or third option says rotate page. Go ahead and push rotate page and then go ahead and rotate it 90 degrees. And it should be right side up now and you'll be able to color it. Go ahead and we're color coding the different parts of the brain. We've got the frontal lobe, that's going to be yellow. And you're going to see that the parts of the brain, the lobes, have these lines that are pointing to them, and then there's a horizontal line. That's where I want you to put the name of the lobe, okay? So go ahead and write this down here, and then once you're finished, go ahead and move on. If you need to go back to yesterday's video to start from the very beginning of the packet, please do that. All right, so today we just started talking about the frontal lobe. What I want you to do in your notes is you are going to follow these instructions down here at the bottom. So the first thing that we're going to do is identify the part of the brain on the I am the line above. And so go ahead and write in I am the frontal lobe. And then it says number 2, color the lobe yellow above and on the little brain to indicate where it's located in the brain. So we're going to go ahead and color the lobe yellow, and then in this diagram to the right, we're going to color that yellow. And you're going to notice that the orientation of the brains are a little bit different. If you look at the brain underneath where it says name at the top of this worksheet, if you look at that, you notice the cerebrum or the cerebellum is on the left, which means that brain is oriented so it's looking to the right, okay, because the cerebellum is always in the back of the head. And then if you look at the diagram down below on the bottom right, you'll notice that it's flipped. So this is a strategy, it's a visual strategy. And what we're trying to do is not have you identify necessarily just one shape of the frontal lobe. We're trying to show you this is the frontal lobe. No matter what orientation it is, this is it. And so to kind of solidify that for you, I want you to draw a line from the lobe in your notes to the lobe in the diagram with the whole brain. And then let's go ahead and start filling in the boxes. So I have the information that I want you to write in the boxes. I have that. It's going to show up on the right side of my screen. If you are not a visual person, all the color might be a little distracting for you. So regardless of whether you're visual or not, I want you to make what I have on the screen right now, that should be yellow. And then from now on, you can go ahead and just write the information in the box. You do not need to highlight it yellow. If you are visual, then you might want to go ahead and highlight it yellow. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So number one, eye control. The frontal lobe controls judgment and reasoning. So if you are, riding your bike and you decide that you think it's safe to cross traffic, you're stopping at a stoplight and you look both ways and it's safe to cross traffic. That's judgment and reasoning. You're using your frontal lobe for that. In science class this year, we're going to be using Amplify, and there's a lot of, like in each unit, there's a problem, a real world problem that we're trying to solve. So for example, our very first unit in Amplify is geology on Mars, and there's a channel, like a river channel on Mars, and we're going to try and figure out what actually caused that channel to form. Was it lava or was it water? And I'm going to give you a lot of evidence. We spend a lot of time doing hands-on explorations and experiments and all this really good data that we're going to be using, evidence, and you're going to have to sift through all of that evidence, and you're going to have to come up with a decision at the end of the unit to tell me, do you think it was water or do you think it was lava? And you think that because of which piece of evidence. So all of that has to do with your frontal lobe. Number two, I manage self-awareness. In class, we talked about my granddaughter, how we were at a restaurant waiting for our table, and we're in the lobby, and she grabbed onto my daughter's leg and she started, going around and around in circle and singing a song, and I think she was doing like Ring Around the Rosie. And she was just hanging on my daughter's legs like they were a pole. And I asked everybody, I said, when's the last time you guys did that? Like, would you go to a restaurant right now, and while you're waiting, would you play Ring Around the Rosie with your mom's and use your mom's leg as the Rosie pole? And the answer is obviously not. And why? Because you know that it's not socially acceptable for you to do that. That would be an embarrassing situation for you. Now, I'm not saying you wouldn't do something silly like that, but if you did something silly like that, you're aware that people are looking at you, and you're aware that they might be thinking that you're weird, and you're aware of that, and you kind of want that, right? All the TikTok videos where people record something, you're aware of the response that you're going to get from people. Whereas Lakin is not aware of that. She doesn't have self-awareness. She doesn't realize what she's doing is like everybody sees that. So it's kind of cool to think that your self-awareness comes from the front part of your brain. The front part of your brain, the frontal lobe, creates short-term memories. And I've done a lot of research, a lot of reading, and what I used to think was would be categorized as a short-term memory is actually not. I thought, like you guys learning your locker codes, I thought, like 2 or 3 days of learning your locker code, that maybe that's still considered short-term memory because you may not know it fully. But in reality, a short-term memory is actually like really short. For example, I needed to go get my cell phone today before I came to school. So I walked into my bedroom and then I stood there and went, why am I here? That is a short-term memory. If something is a memory from a couple days, that's actually moving over into long-term memory, which is interesting. Number 4, I'm responsible for problem solving, planning, and concentration. So really, if you're thinking about like how the brain learns, the frontal lobe is really crucial to learning. Not only school, but let's take driving, for example. So if you're learning how to drive, you have to really concentrate. You have to plan ahead. You have to problem solve. If I'm driving my car and I want to go to a specific location, I have to know how to get there, right? That's planning. And then as I'm getting there, I have to concentrate. I need to know where everybody is in relation to my car, front, back, and side. And if there's a problem, let's say there's a road blockage. Let's say that there was an accident and I can't go the way that I want to go. How am I going to get where I want to go? That's problem solving. So all of that takes place in the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe manages your emotional traits like your personality and your behavior. This is fascinating to me. Your personality, what makes you you, what makes you laugh, what you think is funny, your humor, what maybe makes you angry, maybe social problems that bother you, your beliefs, your loves, your passions, your I don't know, just what makes you you. That is in the frontal lobe, and your behavior, it stems right there in the frontal lobe. So I don't know if anybody has any experience with a person who has had a stroke or who has had a traumatic brain injury. And I don't mean a concussion, although that can be hard to get over. And some people have concussions where they just really need to spend a little bit more time healing from that. I'm talking a traumatic brain injury. I used to have a student a long time ago when I taught at my other district, and she was on a four-wheeler, and she was going over the berms, and she lost control, and it flipped, and it fell on her, and she ended up with pretty severe traumatic brain injury, and she was in it was Madonna. It was a rehabilitation center. And I went to go visit her a couple times, and she was not the same person at all. She wasn't, like, she had a hard time remembering. She couldn't recognize me. The very first time I went to go see her, she didn't know who I was. And then, as she's working with the therapist, and as, basically your brain has to heal, and sometimes those neurons have to find different pathways in order to get information to move from one place to the other. And so she would laugh inappropriately. And I don't know how else to say that, but it wasn't, things that weren't funny, she would just start laughing at. And she would get angry at the drop of a hat. And that wasn't like her. She was just a very sweet, easygoing girl. And so her personality changed a little bit. Her behavior changed a little bit because of that injury. I want to come back and talk about number 5 here in a second when we get all the way through, okay? For right now, let's go on to number 6. Number 6, I regulate speech and speaking. So again, if you know of anybody who has maybe had a stroke, if the stroke occurs in this area, which it does a lot, that would affect the speech. I think I was telling you guys one time about how doctors are able to do open cranial surgeries with people that have seizures in this frontal lobe. And it's fascinating. The surgery is while the patient is awake, and they'll ask the patient questions to make sure that the area that they're probing is the exact area that they want, and in fact the area that they don't want. So they don't want to impede speech. They would ask a question, and if the patient couldn't respond, then they knew that that area that they were touching on the brain was responsible for the speech, so that they would move to a different area. It's fascinating. Lastly, the frontal lobe controls voluntary motor activities. This is you being able to control what you do with your movement of your body. So walking, voluntary, writing with a pencil. So somebody that has had a traumatic brain injury is going to have to learn possibly how to walk again, or how to walk differently, or maybe they'll walk with a limp, or they just can't pick their leg, one leg up. They may have to learn how to write all over again. They may have to learn how to feed themselves all over again, because they just don't have that steady voluntary motor activity. So this is all the frontal lobe. A lot of these descriptions are in your vocabulary definition for frontal lobe. Right now, what I want to do is I want to show you a couple things really quickly. We talked in class about a surgical procedure that occurred in the 1930s in America, for sure, and went on for about 20 years, and it's called a lobotomy. And it's kind of a dark time in our nation's medical field. let me kind of explain really quickly. So, it says right here in 1935, at that time, you guys, people didn't really understand the brain, right? And they were just really, they didn't have the technologies that we had. They don't have like the MRI technology. They don't have like how we can really get good detailed images of the brain. They don't have that. And so when people would have mental illness, depression, anxiety, nervous disorder, behavior disorders, somebody could say that even things like ADD or ADHD, if it was really, uncontrolled, in 1935, they didn't have medication for any of that stuff. And a lot of our mental illness today can be controlled under the supervision of a doctor, with medication, with therapy, with coping mechanisms, or the words are escaping me, but like activities that you do to help you, maybe overcome an anxiety, breathing techniques or different things like that. Back then, they didn't know that. And so they would have these people that were just having these behaviors. They didn't know what to do with them. And sadly, a lot of times people would just put their family members in mental insane asylums because they didn't know what else to do with them. It was also people who had developmental disorders, or who were developmentally handicapped. People with Down syndrome, they would just go to these insane asylums or mental asylums, and they just kind of were forgotten, and they were no better than prisons. It was really awful. So they came up, as opposed to saying, gosh, let's not leave these people in these asylums for the rest of their lives. Maybe there's something we can do. And so there's this article here, and I'm going to include that in your folder so you can read it if you want to. But they had this idea that maybe they could alter the brain, and somehow it's just awful, you guys. Let me go here. This is the very first video I'm going to have in there. If you watch this video, this is the anatomy of a lobotomy. I don't have anything that's gross or gruesome. But this gentleman here really does a great job explaining what a lobotomy was and what they did. It's only about 5 minutes long. And then some kind of, as a result, what happened. It's really a tragedy, but at the same time, it's also a testament to how much we've learned about the brain, and we've only scratched the surface. So pretty interesting stuff. So I've got this video, I've got this article, and the article has some pictures, before and after pictures.